Our top story. After months of back and forth and several rounds of failed talks, mediator Qatar has revealed that Israel and Hamas are now at the closest point yet to a ceasefire and a possible hostage release deal. Reports indicate that Hamas has accepted a draft agreement for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and the release for dozens of hostages. Officials have expressed mounting optimism that a deal could be reached ahead of the 20th of January swearing-in of President-elect Donald Trump, whose Middle East envoy has joined the negotiations. But in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, faces an uphill task as there are some elements in the Israeli far right who say, and in fact the police minister said, that he's going to quit the Netanyahu government if he agrees to a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal. Remember, none of this is very easy politically, besides, of course, having long-term impact and ramifications. Of course, President Biden wants to get this going as probably his parting legacy as he demits office after a single term. But for Israel and for the entire Middle East, this is not such a simple open and shut case. Let's quickly now play out this report that tells you the story in greater detail.
Almost a year and a half later, the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas may finally see the light of the day.
There is a distinct possibility that we can get this deal done this week before President Biden leaves office. But as you say, we've been here before, we've been close before, and haven't gotten across the finish line, so I can't make any promises or predictions.
As per the draft proposal, both sides agreed Hamas would release 3 hostages on the first day of the agreement, after which Israel would begin withdrawing the troops from the populated areas. 7 days later, Hamas would release 4 additional hostages, and Israel would allow displaced people in the south to return to the north, but only on foot via the coastal road. Cars, animal-drawn carts, and trucks would be permitted to cross through a passage adjacent to Saleh Adin Road, monitored by an X-ray machine operated by a Qatari Egyptian technical security team. The agreement includes provisions for Israeli forces to remain in the Philadelphia corridor and maintain an 800-meter buffer zone along with eastern and northern borders during the first phase, which will last 42 days. Israel also agreed to release 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, including 190 who have been serving sentences of 15 years or more. In exchange, Hamas will release 34 hostages. Negotiations for the second and third phase of the agreement would begin on the 16th day of the ceasefire.
هذه مفاوضات المسألة ما زالت في حالة سيولة ولكننا يعني متفائلون بشكل خاص.
The new impetus comes after threats by US President-elect Donald J. Trump that hell will break loose if no deal is reached by the time he's inaugurated on January 20th.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is.
The fresh round of talks has raised the hopes of families of hostages, as well as residents of Gaza, who have been under intense aerial bombardment. While the ceasefire talks are progressing, intense protests continue in Israel, demanding Prime Minister Netanyahu to accept the proposal. But Netanyahu is also facing backlash from his right-wing colleagues in the government.
העסקה המתרקמת היא עסקת כניעה לחמאס. אני קורא לחברי, השר בצלאל סמוטריץ', לחבור אליי וביחד לשתף פעולה נגד העסקה המתרקמת. לעוצמה יהודית אין את הכוח למנוע את העסקה לבד, אבל ביחד אנחנו יכולים ללכת לראש הממשלה ולהודיע לו שאם הוא מעביר את העסקה, אנחנו פורשים מהממשלה.
The coming hours and days will be very crucial to determine whether these talks will yield any progress or the cycle of violence will continue. But all this while, the eyes will be on the negotiators to see whether diplomacy can triumph over this conflict. In Delhi, Mohammad Ghazali for NDTV.
Okay, this really tells you the story in terms of what all has happened and what all is on the table. But the question that we asked today, when the ceasefire deal is very near, that will the two sides actually reach a lasting truce deal? One is to be able to get a ceasefire to ensure that the hostages come back. Second is, what are the prospects of it actually lasting? The second key question that we are asking is that will Israel, that's the first one, which is that whether there'll be a lasting truce deal or not. And the second question that we are asking is that will Israel and Hamas put aside their differences? Can they try and bury some of their differences to try and identify areas of some common ground? And the third key question we are asking is, could ceasefire bring down Netanyahu's government? As I said, there are elements within his government who are not in favor of this, and will that impact his political future? And the other key question is, will the ceasefire deal save Biden's legacy? He's a one-term president. He's been term lame duck for the last 6 months. Will this really be his lasting legacy? And lastly, we are asking, did Trump's warning drive the progress in these talks? These talks are not new. They've been going on for a while. But what did it need that fresh push from Donald Trump, who takes office next week? Let's put that now across to the two guests joining me today, which is Omair Anas from Turkey and Professor Awwad, who's a Syrian, joining me from New Delhi. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me. And Omair Anas, let me start with you in terms of the prospect of a ceasefire deal. It's on the table. Talks have progressed. Both sides, or several stakeholders, seem to have expressed optimism. How do you read it right now, the situation?
Thank you very much for having me. The deal at this stage seems imminent, and I think that Hamas has already accepted it. If you see the entire process of deal, Hamas has put two primary conditions to accept the deal. Number one, that Israel should not be in position to resume the fight again. Israel should not be in position to bomb again. And the second is that the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza should be assured. In this deal, which is coming now, the withdrawal of Israeli armies from Gaza has been assured in 3 stages, which means that at the first stage, Israel will take its military from a specific zone, and the second stage and the third stage. And finally, the Israeli forces will be outside of Gaza and will be stationed near Israeli and Gaza borders. So after having these two conditions, I think that Hamas were interested to accept the deal. However, you know that the deal has come at a very crucial time where Hamas have lost so much influence and human resources as well. So I think that Hamas would take a long time to resume or to violate this deal. So I hope that this deal is going to stay for some long time, as the two sides need to rebuild themselves, and especially Gaza would need huge funding, reconstruction, rebuilding process. So the Hamas Gaza side has more incentives and more reasons to stay within the deal.
Okay, let's put that across now to Dr. Awwad as well. That how do you see the situation and the prospect of the ceasefire deal going through, being accepted by both sides?
Thank you, Gaurie. I think the deal will be signed before the Friday, if not on Friday itself. And I think both the sides have received the draft of the deal and accepted in terms of the negotiation. Remember, there is also 2 convoys, one envoy from the American administration, currently Biden, and the second one, Steve Bitcoin, is the second. He is from Trump. For the first time that the American coming president sent an envoy to look into the discussion and what's going on to reach an agreement. And I think that agreement has to happen because they have already accepted the 42 days of the truce and the exchange of the prisoners. And I think Hamas also agreed to the release of 33, not 34, because one of them has already been released by Israelis. So 33 of the prisoners will be released. Those are alive. And the second stage, it will be the remaining hostages, but that only on the 16th day of the deal. So therefore, let's see it can go through. And I think the hopes are on the table because Trump had a deal, in fact, with Netanyahu before the election that before he takes office, he wanted this deal to be done. Biden wanted to have his legacy back before he left office, that he was the one who negotiated this deal and he brought the ceasefire into action and into effect. But I feel that the overall situation that the Palestinians are still dying and more than 32 people have been killed today. So we have 150,000 Palestinians killed and injured for the last 14 months. And still, till the deal is signed, there will be more. But the best part of this deal is that there is no mention of Philadelphia crossing, which is the south of Gaza, between Gaza and Egypt. And if that is not in the agreement, I think Israel is going to stay for long on that. And the ramification of such agreement has to have an impact. And we should not see this signing of this agreement, Gaurie, as in isolation of what's happening in the region, whether in Syria, whether in Lebanon, whether it is in Iraq or Iran.
Okay. Mr. Anas, then let me ask you this, that in terms of, one is the immediate fact that the hostages that have been with Hamas since 7th of October will return. But what about the future? What about long-term prospects of this deal surviving, given the uncertainty in the region?
With an unresolved Arab-Israeli conflict and Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands and the continued movement of settlers across the Palestinian land has made the region ever volatile. And I think that the possibility of disruptive violence and reaction from Hamas and other organizations will remain always there. And at the same time...
Okay, I'm sorry, I'll have to butt in there, sir. I'll have to butt in there because to be fair, there is a representative from Turkey, there is a representative from Syria, but the fact is this is also a conflict, an issue that involves Israel. Israel is not on the panel, but I'm not going to let you make statements like there will be repercussions from Hamas going forward as well. Hamas is a terrorist organization. What it did on the 7th of October is the most heinous attack that could have happened. What has unleashed since then, one can have a different discussion about it. The amount of repercussion that has happened from Israel, that can be a different debate. But what happened on 7th of October 2023 is not up for debate. So, as I said, because there is no Israel on the panel, in the spirit of fairness, and because there are two sides to this discussion, I will urge you to not make comments about Hamas and whether it should exercise any prospect of retaliation in the future against Israel. Let's talk about the prospect of trying to get peace after a possible ceasefire going forward. Yes, Mr. Anas, I'm going to give you airtime, but let's restrict our remarks to what I'm discussing.
I am not representative of any government in Turkey or anywhere. So I express my own opinion. And as I said that the issue is not Hamas or issue is not even Israel. The problem is that there is a Palestinian state which has been approved by the United Nations Security Council. There is a border, there is a territory. And what I am trying to say is that this territory which has been given to Palestine to create a Palestinian state has been occupied by Israel for so many long years.
Okay.
And my point is that if that land is not given, and specifically I would like to mention about President Trump, who has been more than interested in this deal. Why?
Yes.
Because he has an idea of the Abraham Accord.
Yes, he did. He started this. Absolutely.
Yes.
Hold your thought there. I want to get in Dr. Awwad as well, because he's been wanting to come in on this as well. Yes, Dr. Awwad.
Well, I think, as we say, if you don't find a solution for the Palestinian cause, the continuous perpetual provocation for permanent wars in the West Asia and the Middle East will continue. Therefore, I think this truce has to have an established sort of an agreement for the future settlement of the Palestinian issue. But I think what we are going to witness here, Gaurie, is a regional war in the region. And I don't see the development of this ceasefire is seriously going to last for long, because this is a truce. It's not a permanent ceasefire between the two sides. And maybe the Netanyahu government is agreeing. He will be losing Ben Gvir. He will resign for sure. But I'm sure he will survive, because there is no question that any Israeli government at this stage of winning in all the fronts will be willing to have any kind of a compromise. So anybody wanted to reach an agreement with Israel, even the United States is saying it very clearly that it has to be at the dictation of what Israelis' terms and conditions for reaching such an agreement. What I'm witnessing here is only because of the humanitarian loss of the Palestinians. There may be a pressure on the new American administration that should be put to an end to this catastrophe in Palestine.
All right, we leave it there. Gentlemen, thanks much for speaking to me on this story. We are going to revisit this given the fact that it's likely to impact the entire region.